Good evening and welcome back to Tactics Board. Today we're previewing Norwich City's championship clash with Birmingham at Carrow Road. They lost their last championship game 6-2 at Plymouth Argyle, and then they lost 2-1 at Fulham in the Carabao Cup. So that's 4 defeats in their last 5, and Norwich will be desperate to bounce back against a team who have had a mixed start to the season, mainly positive though. After finishing 17th in the championship last season, they find themselves 10th, having been one of the early pace setters in the league. They have dipped a little bit in recent weeks. They lost 2-1 to high-flying Preston in their last game and did drop points against QPR in a 0-0 draw, but they'll still be feeling positive. They obviously recently got new ownership and their team actually looks really good on paper and on the pitch. They've got some players who have really stepped up this season. They signed 12 players in the summer, and some of those have really added to that Birmingham squad, and under a manager in John Eustace who has done a really good job so far. In my opinion, I think they could have some serious prospects this season. Norwich will hope to arrest that for now, at least, by getting back into form. They've struggled, obviously, in recent weeks with those results, and performances haven't been there either. It's not like they've been playing especially well and being unlucky. I think apart from that Fulham game, in which they played quite well, to be fair, Norwich have really struggled to capture the same sort of principles that they had early on in the season. Of course, we know the impact of Josh Sargent and Ashley Barnes' injuries on that team. So it looks like there may well be a significant number of changes from that loss to Plymouth. And I'm going to give you my predicted 11 for the game and tell you how I think it may pan out tactically. So without further ado, this is the team I think David Wagner will choose for Norwich City's game against Birmingham. So I've gone with Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Danny Bart at centre back, Dimitris Yanoudis at left back, Kenny McLean and Adam Forshaw in midfield, with Christian Fasnacht on the right, Przemysław Placheta on the left, Gabriel Sara in a second striker position behind Adamida. Obviously a few changes in there, and I think Angus Gunn is one that's probably quite secure in his position. Of course, has struggled with a very minor injury this week, and George Long impressed in that Fulham game, playing as a backup, but he was also struggling with sort of a sickness bug as well, we're led to believe, so could be a little bit of a fitness issue there. But I think between them it will be Gunn. He had a bit of a shocker in that Plymouth game, but it was probably his first real bad performance in a Norwich shirt. He's not made too many mistakes, and you could tell how disappointed he was during that game, but I think he's built up enough credit, especially under David Wagner, to secure his position for this one. So I've got him in goal. Jack Stacey is somebody who I think needs to perform. He's still, I think, will be Wagner's choice for this game, especially given Kellen Fisher's sort of inexperience. He again was very impressive against Fulham, and Stacey is one of those who's seen a significant drop-off from his early season form. So I think he needs to get back to the sort of, maybe even the basics that helped him thrive so much early on in the season. Just get to attacking well, defending well, crossing into the box. He seems to he's struggled a little bit technically in the last few games, and I think if Norwich are to see the same sort of profits from the flanks as they have previously, then Stacey does need to get back up to top form. Shane Duffy I've gone with at centre back. I think one of them, him and Gibson, has to be dropped after that Plymouth debacle, and given Gibson played the full 90 minutes at Fulham, it would make sense that Shane Duffy would play in this game. I'd be surprised if David Wagner wanted whoever of those was going to start to play the full game against Fulham. That would have been quite a strange strategy. Of course, he could change both centre-backs and go with Jayden Warner and Danny Bart at centre-back, but that Fulham game was actually Warner's first of his career, and again, similarly to the reasoning with Gibson, if he was going to play on Saturday, why would you give him 90 minutes against Fulham? But I think he did underline in that game that he is an option, and that probably gave Gibson and Duffy a big push in terms of their performance, because he can offer something very different. He offers the pace that Norwich maybe have struggled with in recent games, the main pitfall of their system defensively. And I think if Norwich get exposed in the same way they did against Plymouth, which I think is possible and I'll get into later, then that could definitely open the door for Jayden Warner and the different tactical options that he provides. I've also gone with Danny Bart. Again, somebody has to get dropped, And when they do, you've got a senior centre-back who's been there waiting on the bench for the whole of the season. It makes complete sense for him to start in this game, and I think Norwich fans are looking forward to seeing what he can do. Hopefully he proves up to the task after a really difficult week or more than a week for Norwich City's centre-backs, and that's an area that Norwich definitely need to shore up again if they want to push on as they did early on in the season. So I've gone with Danny Bart in there. I think his performance will be really important if Norwich want to kick on. Dimitris Yunus at left back was one I thought about a little bit because, again, he wasn't great at Plymouth. His attacking instincts were very much cut off by Steven Schumacher and the tactical setup that he went for against Norwich. But you can't count on that happening under John Eustace and with Birmingham as well. They haven't really gone with a back three at any point this season, so I'd be surprised if they switch to that just to combat Norwich's fullbacks. So this could be a game where Yunus thrives a little bit more. But again, as with everyone that featured in that Plymouth game, really, he's somebody who needs to step up the levels because Sam McCallum, although somebody who probably has struggled to gain recognition under Wagner, was somebody who I thought played very well on Wednesday against Fulham, despite getting an early yellow card and facing Harry Wilson, who's obviously a very experienced operator at Premier League level and at Championship level. I thought he stood up to the task pretty well. So I think he's putting pressure on Yunus, but I think Yunus will start in this game. And then in midfield, this is where things start to really change and where maybe there's a little bit of a question mark over it. But I think most of the fan base has rested on the idea that Adam Forshaw will probably play this game. Gabriel Sara was pushed forward into that supporting role against Plymouth, which allowed Norwich to attack with a little bit more fluidity, with a better link between their midfield and their strikers. Obviously, Adam Eder got 2 goals and one of them was assisted by Sara. And in order to allow that to happen, Norwich need to put a midfielder in there. And for me, it has to be Adam Forshaw. Played really, really well against Fulham. David Wagner's talked him up so much. And I know for PR reasons, managers talk about all of their players positively, but this has been a cut above. He really does seem to rate Forshaw very highly. He's very experienced at this level and can play in that more defensive position a little bit better. I think he suits that better than Sara even, and probably gives Norwich a little bit more security. And then when you've got Sara there instead of a striker, overall that should hopefully shore up the defensive situation a little bit more. And you'd think Forshaw and McLean at Championship level are a duo that can do that job. But yeah, I would be very surprised if McLean is dropped. Of course, he's been the captain for most of the season and has been Mr. Reliable. Yes, he had an off day against Plymouth, but in a team where everyone's playing poorly, I think it's difficult, unless you're going to drop everyone, to drop somebody who's been an absolute ever-present so far. So I've got Kenny McLean and Forshaw in that midfield. And then on the wings, I had a real debate with it. I think it could really be any combination because John Rowe and Christian Fasnacht have both been pretty poor in recent games. I think defensively, Wagner's had some reservations about how Rowe has played. He hasn't been especially pleased with that. Fasnacht on the ball has been really poor, completely different to what we saw in that 1-0 win over Stoke and what we saw earlier on in the season. And then he obviously gave away that very, very rash penalty against Leicester as well. So it's not been a good couple of weeks for Norwich City's wide men. And then by contrast, the likes of Przemysław Placheta, Borja Sainz, even Tony Springett is somebody who David Wagner likes a lot, and I know Hernandez has had a couple of good cameos as well. Those ones who haven't been starting have all of a sudden stepped up when they've been given a chance. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Rowe and Fasnacht to produce what they have, and I think one of them will be dropped. Out of those two, for me, I went with Fasnacht because I think Wagner will look at players he feels are the most reliable. Fasnacht is somebody who he's a very big fan of, who has a lot more experience and who probably contributes at both ends of the pitch more than Rowe. And although Rowe does look electric when he's on it and probably can contribute in an attacking way that Fasnacht maybe can't at times, I think in this vital game where Norwich really need to just get back to basics, Wagner may want to trust the players who've been more committed to it. I don't want to say committed, but have fit more with his tactical ideas. And Przemysław Placheta is somebody who's done that very well. Wagner spoke earlier on in the season about how there's very much a need to tell him exactly what he has to do in and out of possession in minute detail. And I think we saw that early on in his Norwich City career. He's clearly somebody who has very strong physical attributes, but his decision making is poor unless you almost make those decisions for him. So in that sense, I think Wagner has done his development absolute wonders and can take a lot of credit for his good performances this season, but it almost feels like you can't not put Placheta in the team now, given some of the performances he's produced sort of in the cup and in substitute appearances. I thought he was excellent against Fulham again, and although I'm expecting it's very possible I'll be proven wrong on the wingers, I have tentatively gone with Placheta and Fastnacht. Already obviously spoke about why Sarah, I think, will be in that withdrawn striker role, the second half against Plymouth. Ironically, because he couldn't really do anything about the result at that time, was probably the best performance, the best 45 minutes he's put in since he won that August Player of the Month award. He's just really tailed off in recent games, and it's been a bit of a worry how inconsistent he's been. I think it's gone under the radar, but on the ball he's been sloppy. Defensively, he's been weaker than maybe we've grown used to seeing, and I think he really does need to get back on good form, because he can easily be Norwich City's best player, but he hasn't shown that in recent weeks. Up front, Adamida, because there's not really much choice. Hwang, of course, got 75 minutes against Fulham, but just hasn't looked the player that Norwich need yet. Wagner spoke about the fact that he needs to maybe get used to their attacking philosophy a little bit more, and hopefully that does make the difference, but it just doesn't look like he's really what Norwich need at all. It looks like he's probably somebody who would thrive in a slower possession-based team, maybe even a Daniel Farke team. But yeah, he hasn't really thrived in this Norwich setup yet. Hopefully he can adapt to things and can prove the signing that Norwich needed, really. But I think for now, especially given the 2 goals in that Plymouth game, that Adamida is pretty nailed on to start this game. And just to finish, I wanted to talk a little bit about Birmingham and the threats that they possess. Of course, they've got Jay Stansfield, who's been the main man, really, the main danger for them this season. I think there's a little bit more analysis of him on Terrace Talk, which you can watch on our YouTube channel now. But what I really wanted to highlight was actually that they could play quite similarly to Plymouth. Plymouth decided to target the middle of the pitch, to target Norwich City's slightly slower centre-backs, to go more direct and to test their pace and their athleticism, and to, rather than to play through, to just go straight over. And that's something Birmingham could do. They play with, although Stansfield is a second striker, he's not an out-and-out number 9, they play with him and Hogan, so they could match up the centre-backs and sort of go toe-to-toe with them. And then if they can execute that in the same way that Plymouth did, then that's going to be a real problem for Norwich. That's why I think extra solidity with Forshaw in midfield could really suit them, and hopefully it does if they want to get the 3 points. But I think that's where the threat may well come from Birmingham. But they have good players all over the pitch. They've got really strong midfielders. Bielik they brought in from Derby in a very astute deal this summer. Bakuna is also in there and has impressed for them so far this season. So I think under the radar, they've got some really good players. Lee Buchanan at left back, Cody Drama at right back. So under the radar, they've got a really good squad for Championship level. Quite a lot of experience, but also mixed with younger players and exciting players. And I think they will do well this season. So it's by no means an easy task for Norwich, but I would put it in the winnable category when Norwich need that game, really. I think a lot of it centres around how that striking situation works out, as well as the centre-backs. It's all about the middle of the pitch for Norwich for me in this one. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. Of course, we'll be across everything that you need to know from the game. So just head to pinkun.com/subscribe. Pinkun Plus is $1.99 for your first 2 months, and then only $2.99 thereafter. And we've got plenty of good stuff on there. Subscriber exclusive columns, tactical analysis will be obviously across every kick, and you can follow the game with Connor's live blog on the day of the game as well. So we'll have plenty there. Look forward to seeing you there, and hopefully Norwich can get back on track. Thank you for joining me on Tactics Board, and I'll see you very soon.